The North Atlantic spray froze instantly on the bridge windows of the Admiral Hipper as Captain Heinrich Meyer-Dierks peered through binoculars into the Arctic darkness. December 31st, 1942, and his heavy cruiser was hunting Convoy JW 51B alongside the pocket battleship Lutzow. For 2 years, German surface raiders had terrorized Allied convoys using superior optics and trained crews. But in the next 4 hours, everything would change. When HMS Belfast shells began landing with impossible accuracy through a blizzard, the Kriegsmarine would discover that the British had transformed naval warfare forever. The age of radar-controlled gunnery had arrived, and Germany was fatally behind. If you're fascinated by naval warfare and the technology that changed history's greatest battles at sea, subscribe for more untold stories of innovation and combat. The operation had been meticulously planned. German naval intelligence had tracked Convoy JW 51B since it left Scotland, bound for Murmansk with vital supplies to the Soviet Union. The Admiral Hipper, one of Germany's finest heavy cruisers, packed 8 8-inch guns that could tear apart merchant vessels from beyond their escort range. Alongside the Lutzow with her 6 11-inch guns, they formed a surface action group that should have annihilated the convoy in minutes. The German force had every traditional advantage. Their optical rangefinders were the finest in the world, their crews veterans of multiple convoy raids. The Arctic winter provided perfect cover, with only 4 hours of dim twilight, breaking the perpetual darkness. The weather was deteriorating, with snow squalls and force 8 winds that would make accurate shooting nearly impossible for defenders relying on visual targeting. Captain Meyer-Dierks had reason for confidence as his lookouts reported smoke on the horizon. At 0830 hours, the Hipper made contact with the convoy's escorts. Through the gloom, Meyer-Dierks identified several destroyers and what appeared to be a light cruiser. He ordered full speed ahead, planning to brush aside these escorts and fall upon the helpless merchant ships. The familiar rhythm of surface action began with range estimates called out, "Gun crews, standing ready," the ship trembling as her engines pushed through the heavy seas. But something was wrong from the first exchange of fire. The British cruiser, which Meyer-Dierks now identified as HMS Sheffield, was shooting with uncanny accuracy despite the terrible conditions. Her shells walked toward the Hipper in perfect steps, each salvo correcting from the last with mathematical precision. This wasn't the wild shooting typical of low-visibility engagements. The British were aiming with purpose in conditions where German rangefinders could barely distinguish sea from sky. Then HMS Belfast appeared from behind a snow squall, her 12 6-inch guns opening fire immediately. The first salvo straddled the Hipper, sending towering columns of water over her deck. The second salvo scored a hit on the Hipper's aircraft hangar, starting a fire that illuminated the German cruiser in the Arctic darkness. Meyer-Dierks ordered evasive maneuvers, but the British shells followed every turn, every speed change, as if guided by an invisible hand. Lieutenant Commander Ernst Schmallenbach, the Hipper's gunnery officer, was frantically trying to establish accurate range. His optical equipment, precise as it was, needed at least momentary visual contact to function. The snow and darkness made this nearly impossible. Yet the British shells kept coming, bracket after bracket, with a consistency that defied explanation. In desperation, he ordered star shells fired to illuminate the targets, but the magnesium flares only reflected off the snow, creating a white wall that made visibility worse. The revelation came from the radar operator, a young technician named Otto Kretschmer, who had been tracking the British forces on the Hipper's search radar. He reported something extraordinary. The British radar missions were different, more focused, pulsing in patterns that corresponded exactly with their salvos. This wasn't just search radar. The British were using radar to aim their guns, to track their shells in flight, to correct their fire in real time. It was technology the Germans hadn't even theorized possible. A shell from Belfast tore through the Hipper's forward turret, killing half the gun crew instantly. Another destroyed the secondary fire control position. Meyer-Dierks realized with growing horror that he was fighting blind against an enemy who could see perfectly. Every traditional advantage of surface warfare, surprise, superior training, better equipment, meant nothing against an opponent who had transcended visual limitation entirely. The German forces' tactical plan collapsed within minutes. The Lutzow, unable to close with the convoy due to the destroyer screen's aggressive attacks, fired blindly into the gloom. Her massive guns, capable of sinking any cruiser with a single well-placed salvo, were useless without accurate targeting data. Meanwhile, the British destroyers launched torpedo attacks with timing that suggested they knew exactly where the German ships would be, their approach vectors calculated by invisible mathematics. Meyer-Dierks ordered smoke screens laid, a tactic that saved German raiders many times before. But the smoke that should have hidden them seemed to make no difference. Belfast shells continued to fall with murderous accuracy, guided by electromagnetic waves that passed through smoke as easily as clear air. The Hipper's deck was increasingly littered with casualties, her superstructure pocked with holes, fires spreading despite damage control efforts. The most chilling moment came when the Hipper attempted to break contact, turning away at full speed into a convenient snow squall. For a few precious minutes, the British fire slackened. Then, impossibly, it resumed with the same deadly precision. Belfast was tracking them through the storm, through the darkness, beyond any range at which German lookouts could even confirm the British ships existed. They were fighting ghosts that struck with mathematical certainty. Admiral Oskar Kumetz, commanding the German force in the Hipper, watched his tactical plot dissolve into chaos. The British destroyers moved like wolves coordinating through telepathy, appearing from snow squalls to launch torpedo attacks at perfect angles. His own destroyers, the Friedrich Eckold and Richard Beitzen, reported they couldn't establish visual contact long enough to engage effectively. Meanwhile, the British fire never ceased, walking up and down the German line with mechanical precision that spoke a technology beyond German comprehension. The action report from the Hipper's damage control teams painted a grim picture. 3 secondary batteries destroyed, the aircraft catapult wrecked, flooding in 2 compartments and over 40 casualties. But the physical damage was less significant than the psychological shock rippling through the crew. These were veterans who had sunk dozens of merchant ships, who had fought surface actions from Norway to the Bay of Biscay. They knew what naval combat looked like, and this wasn't it. This was execution by an enemy who had changed the fundamental rules of engagement. Lieutenant Klaus Reinhardt, manning the aft fire control station, tried desperately to get a firing solution on HMS Jamaica, which had joined the battle. His rangefinder operators called out estimates that varied by thousands of yards as snow and spray obscured their optics. Meanwhile, Jamaica's shells landed in tight groups around his position, each salvo correcting from the last with inhuman consistency. When a near miss finally destroyed his rangefinder, Reinhardt realized they were trying to fight a modern war with obsolete tools. The Friedrich Eckold made a fatal error attempting to investigate what her captain believed was a Hipper in the poor visibility. Instead, she encountered HMS Sheffield at point-blank range. The British cruiser's radar-directed gun swung onto target instantly, pumping shells into the German destroyer before her crew could even sound action stations. The Eckold exploded and sank with all hands, 337 men vanishing into the Arctic darkness. Her destruction happened so quickly that the other German ships didn't realize she was gone until she failed to respond to signals. Back on the Hipper, the radar operator Kretschmer was documenting something that would later prove crucial to understanding the battle. The British ships were using at least 2 different radar frequencies, one for search and another much higher frequency for fire control. The fire control radar locked onto targets and held them regardless of weather, smoke, or evasive maneuvers. Even more remarkably, the British seemed able to track the fall of their own shells, adjusting fire based on radar observation of the splashes. Captain Robert Burnett aboard HMS Sheffield would later describe the engagement as the first validation of years of secret development. The Type 284 radar fire control system could track targets at 20,000 yards in conditions where visual rangefinders were useless beyond 5,000. More importantly, it could simultaneously track the target and observe shell splashes, allowing for rapid correction. The German ships appeared on his radar screens as bright dots, their every movement plotted and anticipated by the gunnery computer. The Lutzow's experience was equally devastating. Captain Rudolf Stang had attempted to circle around the action to attack the convoy's far side, but the British seemed to anticipate his every move. Destroyers appeared from nowhere to launch torpedo attacks that forced him to turn away. When he finally gained a position to engage merchant ships, star shells illuminated his ship perfectly, followed immediately by accurate fire from multiple British vessels. The coordination was too perfect, too immediate to be achieved through traditional communication methods. A German signalman intercepted British radio traffic that deepened the mystery. The British were transmitting targeting data between ships, numerical coordinates that updated continuously. This wasn't the voice commands and visual signals that navies had used since Nelson's time. It was digitized warfare, where one ship's radar picture could guide another ship's guns. The tactical implications were staggering. Every British ship could fight with the sensors of the entire force. By 1100 hours, Kumetz faced a commander's nightmare. His superior force was being systematically torn apart by nominally weaker opponents. The Hipper had taken 3 more hits, including one that destroyed her main battery director. The ship was making smoke from multiple fires. Her speed reduced to protect damaged bulkheads. The Lutzow remained largely undamaged but couldn't close with the convoy without facing coordinated destroyer attacks that seemed to materialize from nowhere. The humiliation deepened when Force arrived, led by HMS Duke of York and HMS Anson, battleships equipped with even more advanced radar systems. Though still distant, their presence was detected by German radio intercepts that showed they had been tracking the German force for hours, vectored in by the cruiser's radar reports. The trap was closing, guided by invisible electromagnetic fingers that reached through the Arctic storm. Kumetz ordered withdrawal at 1,137 hours, a decision that would later cost him his command. As the German force fled westward, British shells continued to fall around them, pursuing them beyond any range at which the Germans could return fire. The Hipper's War Diary recorded the coordinates where the last British shells landed, over 24,000 yards from HMS Belfast, invisibility officially recorded as less than 2,000 yards. It was impossible by every principle of naval gunnery the Germans understood, yet the shell splashes were undeniably real. The psychological impact on the German crews was profound. Seaman Ernst Zimmermann wrote in a letter that was later censored that fighting the British was like boxing a ghost who could see in the dark. You swung at shadows while taking precise hits you never saw coming. The technology gap was so absolute that courage and skill became irrelevant. The British had industrialized naval combat, removing human limitation from the equation. The aftermath of the battle revealed the true extent of the technological gulf. In the Hipper's operations room, navigator Carl Topp compiled the battle track from dead reckoning and radar plots. The result was sobering. The British forces had maintained perfect tactical formation throughout the engagement despite zero visibility, while the German ships had wandered individually, unable to coordinate beyond voice radio range. The battle map looked like organized predators herding confused prey. Admiral Kumetz's report to Naval High Command triggered a crisis that reached Hitler himself. The Führer, informed that his heavy surface units had fled from inferior British forces, flew into one of his legendary rages. He ordered the entire German surface fleet scrapped, its guns removed for coastal defense. Admiral Karl Donitz, who would soon replace Grand Admiral Raeder, barely managed to convince Hitler to rescind the order, arguing that the ship still had value as a fleet in being. But everyone understood the real message. The German surface navy was obsolete. The technical investigation that followed was led by Dr. Hans Dominik, Germany's leading radar specialist. His team interviewed every officer from the engagement, particularly focusing on the radar observations. What emerged was a picture of British capabilities that seemed like science fiction. The Type 284 radar could track a target through a snowstorm, automatically calculate its course and speed, predict its future position, and generate a firing solution accurate to within 50 yards at 10 miles range. More disturbing was the discovery that the British had been developing this system for years. Captured Norwegian resistance documents revealed that the British had been testing radar fire control as early as 1940. While Germany had focused on bigger guns and thicker armor, traditional metrics of naval power, Britain had revolutionized the ability to make those guns hit their targets. It was the difference between a skilled swordsman and an opponent with a targeting laser. Lieutenant Commander Schmallenbach, recovering from wounds sustained during the battle, wrote a classified analysis that was brutally honest. The engagement had not been a battle, but a demonstration of technological superiority, so complete that traditional naval tactics became meaningless. He compared it to cavalry charging machine guns, brave but fundamentally misconceived. The German Navy was fighting the last war, while the British had invented the next one. The impact extended beyond just technology. Captain Heinrich Brüning of the destroyer Richard Beitzen reported that his crew's morale had collapsed after witnessing the Friedrich Echolt's instant destruction. Sailors who had served with distinction for years requested transfers to submarines or shore duty. They had lost faith not in their commanders or their courage, but in the very nature of surface warfare. How could you fight an enemy who could see through darkness and storms? German spies in Britain desperately sought information about the radar fire control systems. What they discovered was even more depressing. The British were already developing Mark II versions with greater range and accuracy. American ships were being equipped with similar systems mass-produced in quantities Germany couldn't match. Every month that passed, the technological gap widened. The electromagnetic spectrum had become a battlefield where Germany was essentially unarmed. The Kriegsmarine attempted countermeasures, installing primitive radar warning receivers that could detect British radar emissions. But knowing you were being tracked provided little comfort when you couldn't respond in kind. It was like being hunted by a sniper with thermal imaging while armed with a musket. The theoretical knowledge of the threat didn't translate into practical defense against it. A captured British sailor from a destroyer sunk later in 1943 revealed under interrogation details that stunned his questioners. He described the radar fire control process as routine, even boring. Operators sat in comfortable chairs watching cathode ray tubes, turning dials to keep electronic markers aligned. The computer, a mass of circuits and vacuum tubes, did all the calculating. Gun crews simply loaded and fired on command, never seeing their targets. War had become an industrial process. Human skill replaced by electronic precision. The strategic implications were catastrophic for Germany. Surface raiders, which had tied down enormous Allied resources, became suicide missions. The Scharnhorst would learn this fatally a year later, destroyed by radar-directed gunfire in similar conditions. The Tirpitz, mightiest battleship in the German fleet, spent the rest of the war hiding in Norwegian fjords, her powerful guns useless against an enemy who had transcended visual combat. Internal German Navy communications from this period, discovered after the war, showed a service in existential crisis. Younger officers pushed for resources to be redirected to radar development, while older admirals clung to traditional concepts of naval warfare. The bureaucratic infighting wasted precious months as committees debated whether radar fire control was a temporary advantage or a fundamental revolution. By the time they accepted the latter, it was far too late. The human cost of the technological gap became apparent in the casualty figures. The Battle of Barents seesaw 337 German sailors killed versus minimal British losses. But the psychological casualties were far greater. Hundreds of trained naval personnel, recognizing the futility of surface warfare against radar-equipped opponents, requested transfers. The German surface fleet, once the pride of the Reich, became a hollow force, its ships confined to port while U-boats carried a naval war alone. Captain Meyerdierks, in his final report before being relieved of command, wrote prophetically about the nature of future warfare. Victory would belong not to the side with the biggest guns or the bravest sailors, but to the side that could best sense and process information. The electromagnetic spectrum was the new high ground, and whoever controlled would control the battlefield. The British had recognized this truth, while Germany was still preparing to fight the last war. The final humiliation came 6 weeks later when intercepted British communications revealed they had considered the Battle of Barents Sea a minor skirmish, notable only for validating their radar fire control systems. Admiral Bruce Fraser's report to the Admiralty described it as excellent live-fire training for newer radar operators. The convoy JW-51B had lost no merchant ships, while the German surface fleet had expended enormous resources and suffered significant damage, achieving nothing. The British were so confident in their technological superiority that they were using combat against German heavy cruisers as practice. In Berlin, Grand Admiral Erich Raeder faced the impossible task of explaining to Hitler how the pride of the German Navy had been driven off by a force it should have annihilated. The Führer's response was volcanic. On January 6, 1943, he summoned Raeder and delivered a 90-minute tirade that witnesses described as unprecedented in its fury. Hitler declared that the heavy surface units were worthless steel consuming resources better used for tanks and aircraft. Raeder, recognizing that his position was untenable, submitted his resignation that day. The ascension of Karl Donitz to Grand Admiral marked the effective end of German surface naval operations. Donitz, a submariner at heart, immediately redirected resources to U-boat production, but even he couldn't ignore the radar revolution. British aircraft equipped with centimetric radar were finding surface U-boats at night, in fog, in conditions where the submarines thought they were invisible. The same technology that had revolutionized surface combat was now hunting beneath the waves. Dr. Dominic's team made one last desperate attempt to close the technology gap. They proposed Operation Nordpol, a mission to capture a British warship specifically to steal its radar fire control system. The plan involved using a disguised merchant raider to lure a British cruiser close enough for boarding parties to seize the radar compartments intact. The operation was approved but never executed. By mid-1943, German surface ships couldn't venture into the Atlantic without being tracked from the moment they left port. The psychological warfare aspect proved equally devastating. British propaganda broadcasts, intercepted in German naval bases, openly mocked the Kriegsmarine's technological backwardness. They broadcast recordings of radar operators casually discussing tracking German ships, complete with accurate positions that German navigators could verify. The message was clear that every German vessel was visible to British eyes, vulnerable to British guns, living on borrowed time. Lieutenant Reinhardt, transferred to shore duty after the Hipper was laid up for repairs, was assigned to train naval gunners in traditional optical ranging. He found the task increasingly surreal, teaching skills that were already obsolete. His students, fresh from training academies, had heard rumors about British radar capabilities. They asked questions he couldn't answer about how to fight an enemy who could see through darkness. He had no answers because there were none within the paradigm of conventional naval warfare. The Hipper herself never recovered from a psychological defeat. Repaired but essentially broken in spirit, she was relegated to training duties in the Baltic. Her crew, once elite veterans, were dispersed throughout the Navy, carrying with them stories of the ghost ships that could see and strike through any weather. The magnificent heavy cruiser, designed to dominate the seas, spent her remaining years as a floating classroom teaching tactics that no longer mattered. In March 1943, a conference of German naval architects and engineers concluded that matching British radar fire control capabilities would require a complete redesign of German warships. Power generation systems would need upgrading to support the electronics. Interior spaces would require reconfiguration for radar operators and computing equipment. The superstructure would need modification to mount radar directors. Essentially, they would need to build an entirely new fleet. With Germany fighting on multiple fronts and its cities under constant bombardment, such resources simply didn't exist. The human stories from this period revealed the depth of demoralization. Captain zur See Wilhelm Meisel wrote in his private diary about visiting the wounded from the Barents Sea battle. Men who had served with distinction throughout the war spoke of feeling helpless, like children fighting adults. One gunner described spending the entire battle traversing his weapon, seeking targets he never saw while British shells landed around it with clockwork regularity. The technology gap had broken something fundamental in their warrior spirit. Intelligence reports from neutral Sweden confirmed what the German Navy feared. The British were sharing radar fire control technology with the Americans and Soviets. By late 1943, every major Allied warship would have capabilities that Germany couldn't match. The electromagnetic revolution wasn't a temporary British advantage, but a new foundation of naval power that would define the post-war world. Germany had missed the revolution and would never catch up. The Scharnhorst destruction on December 26, 1943, proved the Barents Sea battle was no fluke. Detected by radar at extreme range, tracked through Arctic darkness, and destroyed by radar-directed gunfire from HMS Duke of York, she never had a chance. Her optical rangefinders, the finest German engineering could produce, were useless against an enemy who fought with electromagnetic waves. Of her crew of 1,968 men, only 36 survived, pulled from the freezing water by British destroyers guided to their exact positions by radar. Admiral Donat's final assessment was stark. The surface fleet that had once challenged British naval supremacy was reduced to a fleet in being, its value purely theoretical. The heavy cruisers that had terrorized Allied convoys were confined to port or relegated to training duties. The technological revolution that began with magnetron development in British laboratories had rendered conventional naval warfare obsolete. Germany had built perfect weapons for the wrong war. The last operational mission of the Admiral Hipper came in early 1945, evacuating German civilians from East Prussia as Soviet forces advanced. Even this humanitarian mission was conducted in terror of British radar detection. The once proud commerce raider crept along coastlines, hiding in fjords, running only at night despite knowing that darkness provided no protection from radar eyes. She was scuttled in Kiel Harbor on May 3, 1945, destroyed by her own crew rather than risk another engagement with an enemy who could see everything. In his post-war memoirs, written in Spandau prison, Grand Admiral Donat reflected on the Barents Sea battle as the moment German naval power effectively ended, not at Jutland, not at Scapa Flow, but an obscure Arctic engagement where British technology had rendered German courage and skill irrelevant. The radar revolution had changed warfare so fundamentally that traditional military virtues became meaningless without electromagnetic superiority. The British official history, published in 1953, devoted only 3 pages to the Battle of Barents Sea, calling it a successful defensive action of minor strategic importance. But buried in the technical appendix was the truth. The Type 284 radar fire control system had achieved an average accuracy of 2% at ranges exceeding 20,000 yards in conditions where visual ranging was impossible. By comparison, the best optical fire control in perfect conditions averaged 5% at similar ranges. The British had made their guns 6 times more accurate in impossible conditions. The lesson was clear and brutal. In the age of electronics, the side that could better sense, process, and act on information would triumph regardless of traditional military advantages. The Admiral Hipper-class cruisers, masterpieces of conventional naval architecture, had met HMS Belfast's radar and discovered they were already obsolete. The electromagnetic spectrum had become the ultimate high ground, and Britain had seized it while Germany was still fighting on the surface of the sea. Thank you for joining us on this fascinating exploration of how radar fire control changed naval warfare forever. The Battle of Barents Sea marked a moment when electronics replaced human eyes as a primary sensor in combat, a revolution that continues to shape military technology today. If you found this story compelling, please subscribe and share it with others interested in naval history and military technology. What other technological revolutions in warfare would you like us to explore? Leave your suggestions in the comments below. Remember, sometimes the most decisive battles are won not with bigger guns, but with better sensors. Until next time, keep discovering the hidden technologies that changed our world.